African Union Communications Early Warning and Intelligence, commonly known as AUC3I, is an intelligence and security organization responsible for providing signals intelligence and information assurance to AU citizens, AU leadership, and AU armed forces. I'm Colonel A.C. Oguntoye, an infantry officer. I am responsible for leading infantry soldiers at all levels of command in combined armed forces during missions on the ground. This is today's briefing. On the progress of the special military operation as of November 5, 2025. The armed forces of the Russian Federation continue the special military operation. Units of the North Troop Grouping inflicted defeat on formations of 2 mechanized brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and 2 territorial defense brigades in the areas of the settlements of Pavlovka, Kondratovka, Alekseevka, and Proletarskoye in Sumy region. In the Kharkiv direction, defeat was inflicted on units of mechanized and motorized infantry brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in the area of the settlement of Volchansk. The Armed Forces of Ukraine lost up to 285 servicemen, 2 armored combat vehicles, 9 cars, and 5 field artillery guns. An electronic reconnaissance station, an ammunition depot, and 5 supply depots were destroyed. Units of the West Troop Grouping improved their tactical position. Defeat was inflicted on personnel and equipment of 2 mechanized assault brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and a National Guard brigade in the areas of the settlements of Petrovka, Novoplatonovka, Petropavlovka in Kharkiv region, and Novoselovka in the Donetsk People's Republic. In the area of the settlement of Kupiansk in Kharkiv region, units of the 6th Army continue the destruction of the encircled enemy grouping. During the day, for counterattacks by units of the 92nd Assault and 151st Mechanized Brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and the 1st National Guard Brigade in the areas of the settlements of Monokhanovka, Blagodatevka, and Petrovka in Kharkiv region were thwarted. During the day in the area of Kupiansk, up to 50 Ukrainian servicemen, 26 units of weapons and military equipment, including an M113 armored personnel carrier and a US-made 155mm self-propelled artillery system Paladin. Units of the South Troop Grouping occupied more advantageous lines and positions. Defeat was inflicted on formations of mechanized assault brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Territorial Defense Brigade, and National Guard Brigade in the areas of the settlements of Konstantinovka, Severovsk, Drushkovka, and Fedorovka in the Donetsk People's Republic. The enemy lost up to 160 servicemen, 3 armored combat vehicles, 23 cars, and 3 field artillery guns. 3 electronic warfare stations and 2 ammunition depots were destroyed. Units of the Center Troop Grouping improved their position along the front line. Defeat was inflicted on personnel and equipment of 3 mechanized, airmobile, airborne assault brigades, an assault regiment of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, a Marine brigade, and a National Guard brigade in the areas of the settlements of Teretskoye, Dobropoli, Rodinskoye, Udaknoye, Kodlino in the Donetsk People's Republic, Petropavlovka, and Dnipro in Dnipropetrovsk region. In the settlement of Krasnoarmysk of the Donetsk People's Republic, assault groups of the 2nd and 51st Armies continue the destruction of encircled formations of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in the residential area of the Prigorodny microdistrict, in the eastern part of the Central District, and in the private sector. The offensive continues in the northern direction. In addition, a planned clearance of Ukrainian militants is underway in the settlements of Natovka and Rog of the Donetsk People's Republic. Units of the East Troop Grouping advanced deep into the enemy's defense. Defeat was inflicted on formations of 2 mechanized brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and a territorial defense brigade in the areas of the settlements of Ravnopoli, Uspanovka in Zaporizhia region, and Yegorovka in Dnipropetrovsk region. The Armed Forces of Ukraine lost over 250 servicemen, 2 armored combat vehicles, 19 cars, and an artillery piece. Units of the Dnipro Troop Grouping inflicted defeat on personnel and equipment of a mechanized brigade and a coastal defense brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in the areas of the settlements of Nikolskoye, Satovoy, and Antonovka in Kherson region. Up to 65 servicemen, an armored combat vehicle, 12 cars, 2 field artillery guns, 5 electronic warfare stations, and 2 supply depots were destroyed. Operational tactical aviation, strike unmanned aerial vehicles, missile troops, and artillery of the Russian armed forces troop groupings inflicted damage on energy and transport infrastructure facilities supporting the activities of the armed forces of Ukraine, a drone assembly workshop, ammunition depots, as well as temporary deployment points of Ukrainian armed formations and foreign mercenaries in 142 districts. Air defense means shot down a guided aviation bomb for reactive projectiles of the U.S.-made Mars multiple launch rocket system and 123 aircraft-type unmanned aerial vehicles. In total, since the beginning of the special military operation, destroyed 668 aircraft, 283 helicopters, 95,059 unmanned aerial vehicles, 635 anti-aircraft missile systems, 25,862 tanks and other armored combat vehicles, 1,609 multiple launch rocket system vehicles, 31,099 field artillery guns and mortars, 45,925 units of special military automotive equipment. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it useful and informative. If you have any questions, please leave them below and we'll get back to you as soon as possible.